pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Public comment, we have Sarah Watson would like to make a comment. Your comments to the chair.
Hello. Hi, I'm Sarah Watson, 412 North 5th Avenue. So good afternoon, members of the Health and Human Services Committee. I'm Sarah Watson. I serve as a Wausau City Council Alder. I'm a president of the Board of Directors for NAMI Northwoods, but before you, I am a concerned citizen. So I'm here this afternoon to strongly encourage this committee to draft and support a resolution urging our state and federal legislators to protect Medicaid from funding cuts. Medicaid's not just a budget item, it's a really critical resource for our community. Nearly 23% of Marathon County residents depend on Medicaid for essential health care. That includes mental health services, long-term care, and support for individuals with disabilities, older adults, and low-income families. Cuts to Medicaid would not only threaten access to care, but also place additional strain on local providers and emergency services, which are already stretched really thin. Beyond direct care, Medicaid funding supports jobs across our county or in our community, in hospitals, mental health clinics, schools, and small businesses that provide essential services. Any reduction in funding could lead to job losses, higher costs for local taxpayers, and increased health disparities in our county. As an alder in Wausau, I will be advocating for a similar resolution at the city level because this issue impacts our entire community. I encourage this committee to take the lead by drafting and advancing a resolution that urges our legislators to reject Medicaid cuts. I know we've done really good work already together in the Housing Task Force or Homelessness Task Force, but I just hope we can continue to collaborate between the city and county to reach more resolutions on issues. So I urge you to take action now before cuts become a reality so that we can protect the health, well-being, and economic stability of Marathon County residents. Thank you for your time and your commitment to our community's future.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Do we have anyone else? All right. With that, we'll move on to item 4, approval of the January 8th, 2025 Health and Human Services Committee meeting minutes. Motion made, motion second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Move on to 5, policy issues, discussion, and potential committee determination, none. 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. Discussion and possible action by Health and Human Services, none. B, discussion and possible action to Health and Human Services to forward to County Board for consideration. 1, informational update and recommendation from the City of Wausau, Marathon County Joint Task Force on Homelessness to extend task force charter until April 1st, 2025. And if the body doesn't mind, I'd like to kind of turn it over to the two guys that are in this room that are actually on that and kind of go through what you guys are looking for here from us. And I'll do the same with the two that follow this as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you two.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Supervisor Conway, feel free to jump in as you feel necessary. So the Homelessness Task Force met several times now. Initially, we wanted to go over the data that's available on the homelessness situation in Marathon County. And Tracy Rieger, who is now Tracy Durante, who is the homelessness coordinator for the city of Wausau, presented a lot of data that we reviewed and found that there are over 200 people that are homeless, people and families that are homeless in Marathon County, that you don't always see them or they don't always use the shelter services because they're not all living on the city streets. A lot of them are what we call couch surfing or living from house to house to house. So that's it's sometimes hard to manage that and to get an accurate count. But according to Tracy, there are over 200 people and families that are homeless at this point in time. What that looks like as far as shelter goes, when we looked at shelter services and partnering with our nonprofits, shelter services are typically somewhat near capacity during the winter months. So it's difficult for everyone to find a bed when it's cold outside or during the winter months. And they do a pretty decent job at getting those folks shelter. One of the things that Tracy does is work with the homeless population and get them into the gap services that they might not voluntarily go into. So she works with them, guides them in the right direction to find affordable homes, which, as we all know, since COVID or before COVID, was really difficult to find. If you're on a fixed income, it's, typically they take into account 30% of your income that goes towards housing. Well, when you're on a fixed income and you're looking for an apartment or some type of housing, and typically it's over $900 to $1,000 for a month, that's almost your entire income for the month. So it's really difficult for folks to get into that type of housing, and that's the first step. The second step is to make sure that they get the services that they need or that those services are available. And Vicki Tilka, who is actually here too, is on the task force. And the discussions that we've had with Vicki are that there are beds available at times. Sometimes they're full, but there are beds available. But the people, the folks have to, move to that direction, and it's typically voluntary. So if they don't voluntarily move in that direction, or they might not know about that service, then they typically find themselves finding shelter at night and then back on the street during the day, and it's just a cycle for them. One of the things that we looked at as well is that Tracy, when she does her service, finding these folks shelter and finding these folks their services that they need, she has a really good success rate. She said over 75% of the time she can transition somebody from being homeless into a successful program and get them shelter and jobs and services that they need. So, but she's only one person. And with only one person managing all of that, it's really difficult for her and her resources to be able to get everybody taken care of. So she struggles with the amount of people that come into homelessness and trying to get those services to them. A couple of meetings ago, we had a meeting with the City of La Crosse, County of La Crosse, and their program called Pathways Home. And if anyone is interested in hearing that presentation, it's on one of our meeting videos. So if you take a look at that, it's a really good program. And what they do is they have coordinators for the city and the coordinators for the county, and they team up together and they work together to work towards a net zero homeless population. So at one point they had a tent city in the city of La Crosse, and it turned out to not be a really good situation because the tent city and trying to manage that was kind of chaos. And what happened was the grounds where this tent city was became contaminated, and they had to scrape the topsoil off and put new soil down for that park that they were living in. So that's one of the reasons that La Crosse moved towards the Pathways Home program. They've been in it for, a year now, I believe, Administrator Leonard, or approximately?
I think their planning has been longer than that, but they are probably about a year in. I think that's a fair estimate to say, into the execution of their multi-stage plan.
That they're doing, and just keep it in the back of your mind that there are constantly people coming in and out of homelessness, but right now keep that number around 200 or so in your mind as well, because it fluctuates here and there, but it's right around that, and that's difficult to manage. And it's peeling back those layers because it's such a complex issue that we really need to take a hard look at, what our short-term recommendations are and our long-term recommendations. And as a task force, we're right on the edge of our 100 days, so we really need to take a look at, if possible, extending that at least until April to make sure that we can finalize everything and see what that program looks like. Short-term recommendations are 365-day shelter. The city of Wausau has allocated some funds to help Tracy and her program, and they're doing an RFP for that. Right now, I don't think anything's finalized yet on that RFP that I know of. So Chief Barnes is working with that, who is also on the task force. And we would also like to partner with the city based on the recommendations from the county board for putting this task force together. And we would really like to be able to, show our support that we can help with this situation as well. And I'm guessing it's not just a city of Wausau problem, it's a county problem because county resources are used as well. Anything else, Supervisor Conway?
I was going to say, Supervisor Conway, I'd like to hear both of you guys, like what your thoughts are as well. Okay. Matt Barnes can wait, right, Matt?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. After Supervisor Conway's done, you're going to be on deck. You're on deck, Matt.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, you hit, I think, most of the main points there. I think the big key takeaway is the combined arms approach of city and county together. Like you said, it's not just a city of Wausau problem. There's plenty of folks. Thank you so much.
No problem. I'm here to help.
Here to help. As I was saying, yes, you hit all the main points, I think. And what is becoming successful in La Crosse is the partnership between the county and the city, and I think that's what we should do here. When we're looking at the data, a lot of the folks that are unhoused and homeless, I think over 77% had some sort of disability, which we have a healthcare center. We have, that responsibility in the state statutes. Same with AODA, same with Veteran Services. When you look at the numbers, there's a lot of components that fall into the county's role, but also the city's role too. I mean, the Wausau PD is the one that's dealing with a lot of the folks. The shelter is downtown, so it's going to be a combination of the county and the city that can actually have impact. There's not going to be a silver bullet, but it's just a multifaceted approach, and I think we're getting close to having deliverables on it. So, yeah, I think one more month and we can actually have a good product to bring back to folks. But the ones that are coming up on the agenda, the 200-ish thousand asked from the county to offset city, what they put up, and then the others I think are what's needed to help these folks out.
All right. Just once. Thanks a lot, guys, for your wanting to be on this task force. I know it's a lot of work. They said you've been putting a lot of hours in, so thanks a lot, both Supervisor Conway and Cavelli. Go ahead. Should I let Barnes go, or do you want to go first? Go ahead. Hello.
I just have a quick question. You mentioned the Partners Home presentation. Do you have a date on that so that we have that in record for someone to listen to?
The Pathways Home?
Sure.
Yes.
So that was
December 11th, I think.
December 11th? Okay,
that was January 8th.
Was it?
January,
Never
okay.
mind that.
Thank you.
Mr. Barnes, go for it.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to clarify a few things. The way I look at the information that's been shared with the task force is we have two different, we have short-term issues that are exigent, and then we have long-term planning in order to have a successful program. And the short-term gap that we have identified right now is the fact that as of May 1st, there's no funding in place to be able to continue 365 shelter. It concerns me greatly what the city of Wausau will look like and Marathon County will look like if we don't have some place for people to be at night. The current capacity of the Catholic Charity Shelter is 30 beds per night. And then when the temperature gets below 10 degrees, they up it to 40. When it's 10 below or colder, they activate Community on Call, which then adds another 15 beds. So when we think about numbers in need of shelter, we can look at those Community on Call nights, which would have about 45 to 47 people in shelter, as well as we knew we had people sleeping in vehicles in the Walmart parking lot and in the Community Partners campus parking lot. So when someone says, like, to keep people from sleeping out on the street, how many shelter beds do we need? I would estimate that's somewhere between 50 and 60. But with that being said, the exigency comes with what happens at the end of April when Catholic Charities closes their doors. And I think there's been a little bit of debate about that. I can only tell you that I've met with their leadership, and when I ask them what happens if there's no funding in place by the end of April, they would revert back to being closed until November of next year, November or October. So that's of great concern to me. And then the long-term strategy that we had discussed, which is looking at something like La Crosse has, which is striving for a functional zero. And functional zero is defined as we are successful through our programming and getting people to leave homelessness at the same rate that people might be entering homelessness. So that the number of homeless don't grow within your community and it becomes more manageable. I was very impressed with what La Crosse is putting together. That might work for La Crosse. I think there's a need, if that's the direction the city and the county want to go. There is a need to customize a plan like that for what will work in Marathon County and what are our specific challenges and needs here. And I think they're a little bit different than what La Crosse has experienced. But I'm at a conference right now, a Chiefs conference down in the Dells, and I met with the La Crosse chief, and I said, what's working and what's not? And he made it very clear that the county has taken on a leadership role and has partnered with the city of La Crosse, and that partnership is what has really, really helped them start to actually move the needle when it comes to homeless issues in their community. So I appreciate everybody's time. And hopefully the city and the county can partner and at some point come up with a process to reach out to the other municipalities surrounding Wausau and get them on board as well to partner into creating an environment where we can reach a functional zero.
Anything further from the
Thank you.
committee? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Matt.
No, I just said thank you.
Oh, okay. With that, I'll turn it over to Administrator Leonard.
Sure, and I'm here to answer questions. I've had the pleasure to sit. I'm not on the task force. I attended all of the meetings save one where I was unable to attend. But just to kind of recap again, as task force chair, co-chair Cavelli referenced and task force member Conway referenced, just a couple of highlights as to the work that they've done. And this builds on what Chief Barnes just referenced. The task force did take some very deliberate action and some clear action relative to some of the goals that they have, and I just want to make sure this committee understands those. So as part of the county board's action and the city council's action to adopt the task force charter, they essentially broke the goals down into short-term, intermediate, and long-term. Now, the sole short-term goal, and I put it up on the screen for the task force, was very specific, and it was to evaluate whether acquisition of some real estate should be pursued by the city and county jointly for transitional housing. Well, that became a non-starter because those housing apartments, that complex was sold to a different buyer. So that short-term action was unable for the task force to really take any action on. But on the intermediate term, And this is something that was referenced earlier in some of the comments. There was a recommendation, the county board and city council were looking for a recommendation relative to, based on the demographic data that was reviewed, whether there really is the necessity to develop a formal mechanism to engage surrounding municipalities relative to resource sharing. And if you've been following in the news, this is not something unique to the Marathon County and Wausau area. Other areas of the state are having this challenge, and the challenge is when you have resources, people find their way to those resources, right? That's not a new thing. But that does pose some challenges to the communities that have those resources in that it further exacerbates kind of that scarcity of resources, right? The idea that we don't have enough resources to serve everyone all the time with all of the needs. So in light of some of the experiences we've had here, the task force was charged with looking at that, and they very clearly did answer that question, and that was at that January 8th meeting that Co-Chair Covelli referenced. The task force answered that question in the affirmative. That is, yes, based on the demographic data that they looked at, there was a sufficient number of individuals experiencing homelessness in our that were availing themselves of resources that weren't long-standing residents of the Marathon County area, that, you know what, a mechanism is needed to engage those surrounding communities. So they answered that in the affirmative. The second really dovetails, the second action taken dovetails with what Chief Barnes just referenced, and that was the idea that the city and county work collaboratively to address a couple of things. So the task force made a motion, and it was successful, that recommended rather that the county administrator, myself, work with city staff collaboratively to develop a short-term recommendation relative to addressing the anticipated gap in shelter services and a long-term recommendation relative to developing a strategic plan to address homelessness. And that motion followed that presentation that was referenced before by both the city and county of La Crosse. So those have been some of the actions that the task force has taken. And again, they did actually take further action relative to the gap in shelter services that Chief Barnes just referenced, looking for the specific action taken. And I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, but it was that a recommendation to the county, which is why it's before this committee, to match or exceed the allocation, the recent allocation made by the city of Wausau to ensure that 365 shelter services continue in the near future, which again builds on what Chief Barnes referenced. So that's been the action to this point. You might ask, why do we need to, or why did the task force ask to extend its charter? Up on the screen, if you don't have in your materials, again, the charter itself, there's a lot of long-term recommendations that the task force was asked to bring forward. And the simple explanation, they need a bit more time to do that. So the recommendation from the task force was to extend through April 1st to do those things. So I think that really tees you up well with item 6B2, which is the resolution approving extension of the charter for the joint task force. Again, that's Corporation Council drafted that based on the action taken by the task force that would extend it through April 1st. The item 6B3 is a resolution amending the charter. Succinctly put, the task force wanted to ensure that another member of the business community was appointed, because there was a member of the business community appointed, but their personal schedules didn't allow them to participate. And then the second amendment is actually to provide for a member of the task force to be appointed, and that is someone who has experienced homelessness during their lifetime. And last, 6B4 is that recommendation from the task force to match or exceed the commitment made by the city to address the need for 365 shelter. And the city's, just for context, the city's action at the just before the end of the year in 2024, they allocated $400,000 of funding, but that was over 2 years. So I think that dovetails with that comment. I can't remember who made it, but referencing $200,000 for 2025. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions from the peanut gallery of having attended all the task force meetings if people are looking for that perspective, but that's the policy. Those are the policy questions as I see it before this body.
So we have two remote wanting to speak or ask questions, so I'll turn it over to Supervisor Marash if you have a question or a comment.
Thank you, Chair Boots. So my question is that I realize the pressing issue is the 365 shelter services at this time, but I'm curious if there's been discussion between the task force and possibly CJCC regarding using any opioid settlement funds to be part of the initiative.
Was any of that discussed? I guess anybody that's been in the meetings?
Yeah, as far as that discussion, we haven't had that discussion as far as the opioid settlement funds and using that.
And I would say, Supervisor Marash, I haven't looked at the opioid settlement conditions closely enough to, I know there's the ability to utilize some of that for housing, but there are, of course, limitations on that. Short answer, no, I haven't looked at it, but I will.
Yeah, that was going to be my question as well. Like, does it fall into the parameters of it for the opioid funding? So, okay. Supervisor Marash, do you have a follow-up or?
No, thank you. That's all.
All right. Supervisor Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I have is for the co-chair or Supervisor Corvelli. Why 100 days? You know, I guess I'm just kind of curious. I don't want to have to bring this back to the board, you know, for obviously an extension, but is 100 days more than enough? I don't want the committee to rush either, the task force to rush either. Just kind of curious as to how you came up to 100 days.
So typically, Supervisor Zhang, point to be determined, and I think that's why 100 days, I would guess, is because you typically try to keep it so that we get the work done and don't just do am I correct in saying that?
Right, yeah. I think the original 100 days, when we first initially started meeting with the task force, it ended up being such a complex issue that we found that 100 days isn't enough to address everything with all of the complexity of the issue. So getting through our policy recommendation goals, looking at short term, which was out of the question after the Annabelle Apartments were sold. We focused on the immediate term and the 45 days and creating those partnerships with the surrounding municipalities, which took us into the long term. But there is so much data and facts that we had to sift through that 100 days wasn't quite enough. So that the next block of time that we would like, and I think that we can do a lot in the next block of time to be able to work on those long-term goals and what that looks like.
So per Supervisor Zhang, you think you're okay with the time that the 100 days?
Yeah, I want to clarify. I was actually thinking that 100 days was going to be too short of another time, and I was just kind of wondering if if it should be more than 100 days. I know we want to move on and set a deadline of this task, but I just didn't want the task force to feel rushed because, as Supervisor Corvelli was saying, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information that needs to go through, and I don't want the task force to feel rushed, but I also want to make sure that they have the flexibility to actually do the time and put some urgency behind it as well. I hope that clarifies what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I think so. I think that and I appreciate, speaking to that. And with the discussions that I've had with Administrator Leonard, and, maybe Supervisor Conway would like to chime in if you think we need more time or not.
I think the extra month and a half would be sufficient. Like you said, the short and medium range ones we kind of have. For the long-term goals, we've got most of them hammered out. for the most part, providing recommendations of the specific roles of local government. We've talked about that, more case management and database creation, identifying gaps in existing mental health and substance treatment. We've talked about detox centers, and we've got the Third Horizons gap analysis. The engagement of the business community, that one we couldn't do because our business representative was never there. So that one we do need to finish. And then support from nonprofits and faith-based organizations. That one we've got pretty good hold on to. I mean, with everyone has a name database, that'll help those agencies much more. Judicare for legal services that are available to nonprofits and religious folks. The 1915 I legislation, which is what Sarah Watson referenced, one of the things that Medicaid could be used for is homelessness, but that may or may not be a thing anymore. So I think apart from the business community one, we're pretty close, but we also need time to polish it up and get it into a finished form that the task force can, all agree on, that nothing got left out, and then something that we can present. So I think those next few meetings should be enough. And then if, to Supervisor Zhang's point, we want to have something ongoing, I think a more formal mechanism could be done for an additional task force, not this body.
All right, with that then, we have basically, the way I'm reading this, we have 4 actionable items by this board. And I think we'll just start with one, look at possible actions, and then work our way through them. So I guess if we want to start with number 1, if anybody wants to do an action on that item. Go ahead.
I make a motion to follow up with number 1. Do you want me to read that?
Sure.
Okay. And that would be 6B1? Or, I'm sorry, 6B2.
6B.
The resolution.
Yep.
All right. I move to approve the resolution approving extension of charter for Joint City of Wausau and Marathon County Homeless Task Force.
We have a motion on the table. Do I have a second? Supervisor Foote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carried. We'll move on to B3 then.
I make a motion to extend it.
Motion on the table. Do I have a second? Supervisor Foote again, the second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. And we'll move to B4. Recommendation from the City of Wausau, Marathon County for homeless. So I did, been reading this, obviously, talked with Administrator Leonard, talked with some other people about this. The full board did say to put this together, so in my mind, we send it that way, and if they want to put money towards it, that's a full, I feel it's a full board, I think, in my mind, because they already passed the task force, so with that, I'll take a motion on 6B4.
Can, maybe Mike wants to walk through. I apologize, we didn't put a resolution in there because you need to talk about what is that commitment and what is the, $200,000 was discussed by this group, and I'm not saying that's your dollar amount, but there's nothing in there that talks about how much money or how long. Is that fair to say, Mike? Or where it comes from. And I think that, I know you're chair of your HR Finance and Property Committee is in here as well. I think Supervisor Marash raised a good question about the source of funding. So you have a couple of policy questions in my mind to break them up. One is, do you want to, make a recommendation to the county board to allocate funding and how much for that need for 365 shelter in 2025? And then the second more operational side of that policy question is, where do you want the money to come from? I had identified in my head kind of three distinct ways you could fund that, but I think Supervisor Marash raised a very solid potential for a fourth. So whether you want to make, if you do make a motion to allocate funding, you could also say identify or task HR Finance with finding the most logical funding source. But that's in my mind. Mike, please correct me if I'm wrong from a legal context, how you think this would be broken up.
I agree with your assessment.
Go ahead, Supervisor Foote.
I just have, I just kind of have a question. I know you probably don't know all 200 homeless people, but are there a majority of people who are homeless due to opioid abuse or you know what I'm saying? I mean, is that something that we then can follow up with and do? I don't know that the task force has had enough time to be like, oh yeah, we already know why these people are all on the streets, and so here's how we can pay for this. I also thought that, the Catholic Charities thing, I thought they were closing, and they are, but they're not closing. I didn't understand, is the money going to them for the shelter? Are they running the 365 thing? That's where I'm a little confused too as to how that is all working. If anyone could clear it up. Thank you.
Supervisor Conway and then then Matthew Barnes.
I'll give it a shot. For the AODA folks, 32% was what Catholic Charities logged as like what they self-identified with. So, and that's out of 298 over the course of 2024 that went to the shelter. Obviously, there's people that didn't go to the shelter or, or that don't report or they don't want to get in trouble. So it's most likely higher than that. But 32% was that. The Catholic Charities, I'll let Matt talk about that. But I don't think this task force ever got like a specific dollar amount of how much it costs currently for the shelter to run. So I don't, I think we should know that figure before we attach something to it, and that we could task, HR Finance to do or however we want to do it. But we should have like a concrete dollar number. I would agree.
Go ahead, Matt.
I just want to talk a little bit and maybe provide some clarity to the shelter question, which is over the last year plus, the city of Wausau has funded Catholic Charities to provide 365 shelters. So we have had that. That contract expires at the end of April. We have not yet established a new contract with Catholic Charities to fund 365 shelter. Because of that cost, our intention is to put out a RFP, which goes a little further than we had previously, that identifies what the measurables are and what success looks like and identifies our expectations, which are things that we've learned over the last several years when funding that programming. And the exigency comes in the lane of if, in which I hope the answer is yes, if the county is a partner with the city, then it only makes sense that the county partners with us in drafting that RFP and establishing what those expectations are. So as of right now, there is no contract in place with anyone, including Catholic Charities, to continue to fund shelter services. I think there are also some other organizations that are interested in potentially providing those type of services. But Catholic Charities right now is the only emergency shelter that is operating. So the pause button on producing an RFP to determine what that cost is going to be. I mean, I know what the costs have been historically that we've paid per month when we're funding that shelter services. I'm not sure if that's of interest to anyone because I think this RFP would likely have a different model for how that would be paid.
So the one question I would have, and I know this is going to come up with the full board, if this goes through, is recommendation from the City of Wausau Marathon County Joint Task Force on Homelessness for Marathon County governments to match or exceed the commitment made by the city to address the need for the 365 shelter. They're going to want to know that number. I mean, it's
Sure.
sort of a blanket, like, it's going to be between 150, 250, 300, but they're going to want to know a number in my mind. I mean, I guess I would want to know a number, but I get what you're saying, Matt, that you got to go forward and get that. But we can say, in my mind, we should say, okay, we're going to look into the costs and then possibly going into an agreement with, once we know the cost. That's just my input on that, I guess.
Yeah, I think when you know, what does it cost to run that shelter? One would think in the somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 a month category, and that's for a shelter service that doesn't have the capacity to meet the needs of what we have in Wausau right now. So I just can't speak to as we increase capacity, how does that impact cost? Some of that's going to be, where would those shelter services be delivered? And what does it cost to be in that space? So there's a tremendous amount of unknowns. But for me, in any future RFP, instead of kind of like the labor and materials that adjust each month, it would be, here's the cost per month to provide those services with some larger capacity. And I think we're going to have to be flexible because we don't have 5 different organizations all providing shelter services in the community right now. There's no backup. Currently, Catholic Charities has, for lack of a better term, a monopoly on shelter services here, and we would be in a really, really rough place as a community if they weren't here providing those services.
Thank you for that. Go ahead.
I have another question. So what about the places, once people get like accepted or start living at like the bridge, are they taken off your roster? Or are they still considered homeless?
No, they're still considered
I think when
homeless.
someone,
Go ahead, Matt.
when you said the bridge, if someone's at Bridge Street Mission in their transitional housing,
Yes.
yeah, I don't think anybody's counting them when they're in that programming as unhoused. They're probably in like a gray area, because they're at risk of returning to being unhoused, but are currently housed. But the reality is, if you look at what exists in this community, you have 2 transitional facilities like that are both faith-based. You have Bridge Street Mission and you have Gospel TLC. You have no services whatsoever in transitional programming or housing for women in this community. And the number of people that can serve is significantly less than the amount of homeless people we have actually on the streets.
Supervisor Conway and then Administrator Leonard.
And technically, yes, up to 90 days in transitional housing. That was the HUD definition that we used. So technically, yes. Because a lot of people, if they go to Bridge Street, they don't make it through the program and they're back out. So.
And just, this probably isn't overly helpful, but I think a lot of the questions, and you're asking all very good questions, they directly go to the need, as I believe Chief Barnes referenced, the need to really look at and tailor our long-term plan to the circumstances that we're experiencing locally. So transitional housing is certainly important, and when you think about that continuum, right, the idea that individuals, if you choose to make this a policy priority, and that could be everything from ensuring that 365 shelter, that idea that someone has a place to sleep. The need is not only to have that available, but also make sure that people, the end goal is to get people long-term stable housing. Transitional housing might be a part of that answer for some people. Other people, perhaps not. Maybe we can put in place a system where it's very quick that they can transition to long-term stable housing. Others, not so much. And as Chief Barnes referenced, we already do have some resources available for transitional housing. But I think when you look at the La Crosse model, the thing that I was impressed with was they really did spend a fair amount of time kind of identifying what are the resources available, what does the community need, and what is the pathway to get there in terms of investment. And like I said, and I believe Supervisor Conway and Supervisor Cavelli referenced this with the task force, that really was a incremental, multi-year process for them to do. And their steps are, I would imagine, fundamentally in some ways different than what we might need. Ending the encampments in their model was kind of on step 3. Well, our community did a lot of investment to already address that issue, which is now rearing its head in the short-term exigency that Chief Barnes referenced. If that resource for emergency shelter goes away, what does that mean for the community? So I just wanted to say that I think it relates, a lot of your questions relate to what needs to be in that long-term plan. And of course, the task force already directed myself and city staff to work together on that. The exigent question, the question really ultimately going to be before the board is, what role, if any, do you want to play in that addressing the short-term need for 365 shelter?
All right, with that, 6B4, Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. I had one question, one comment. The first thing is you mentioned the RFP that's coming forward that Matt Barnes had spoken about. I would think, besides the money issue and how much money to contribute, the county would also want to know what's within that RFP before a decision would be made, because the details of that would be critical to what we would want to support. I think that would be fair to say. The second thing is, if the issue exists beyond Wausau, have the communities in the Wausau area and going beyond into the rural area, have they been contributing to the homelessness task force? Has input from them been sought? Do we have numbers on what the homelessness issue is in those communities? Thank you.
So I can speak to some of that. So as far as the surrounding communities, that was one of our asks of Administrator Leonard, was to partner with the surrounding municipalities as far as resource sharing and what that looks like in their communities. So as far as getting that data from outside of that, I think Vicki might have some information on maybe some data on outside communities or outside of the Wausau area and surrounding communities, who uses those services through social services or the healthcare center. I don't know if you have any of that data or not, Vicki, or can speak to a little bit about that. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
I'm sorry with all that pause that I probably don't have the data you're looking for. So, because I think if the question is what percentage of people who are unhoused are either living in other communities or coming from other communities to Wausau, I feel like that was really the question, not necessarily who we are serving in social services or at North Central Healthcare. So in terms of that, I don't know what specific data we have. I can tell you that La Crosse, they did that analysis because they figured out a way to do case conferencing and sharing names within the team that they developed that was the response team. And I can just tell you their results were only about 10% of people were really outside of the La Crosse area that were unhoused. Now, that doesn't mean we'll be comparable, exactly comparable by any means, but the vast majority of people that they have in the situation right now that are unhoused are from La Crosse. I don't know if that's helpful.
Sure, and I think maybe Chief Barnes can speak to, outside communities and, what happens to the city of Wausau when folks get dropped off at the city limits. Chief, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think La Crosse has something that we don't, which is which Vicki referenced, which is case conferencing, where they can actually talk about an individual with all the providers. And we are not there yet. We're not even close to being able to do that. That helps them really get concrete data. Our experience and our estimation is probably higher, much higher than 10%. What I can tell you is we, on a regular basis, are having individuals dropped off in Wausau to receive services, not in an effective way, from communities outside the corporate city limits of Wausau. And I think it just, the idea that people are entering homelessness, but they're only entering homelessness if they're City of Wausau residents is a fallacy. And if an individual enters homelessness through one of our other communities in Marathon County, where are they going to go? They're going to go to where the resources are to be able to sustain life. And that is in the corporate city limits of Wausau. So we end up having those individuals become Wausau residents because all the other municipalities in Marathon County and in the surrounding counties and the northern counties in Wisconsin don't have any resources at all to be able to assist that portion of their community. And it ends up on the backs of Wausau. And it's an incredible frustration that requires a lot of phone calls from myself and my staff to other chiefs of police and other providers in outside counties and other municipalities in regards to the lack of humanity in treating a human like a hot potato. And we don't want them in our communities, so we go drop them off at 1 o'clock in the morning at the Quick Trip on Grand Avenue. And that individual is an unmedicated, homeless schizophrenic. And within 30 minutes, the Wausau police are called to address their behavioral issues. So that is a regularly occurring situation. And sometimes it's from other counties and sometimes it's from neighboring communities.
All right, with that, I'd like to go back to B4 on our actual recommendation. And I guess I'm going to lean on the two members that are on there as the elected. You feel that we should push something. The question I have is if we do look for numbers and some other things, we really don't have time for the 365 that comes in April, correct? Because we would have one more month, March.
Yeah, my suggestion would be, if we can put something together today to bring to the full board, that would be phenomenal because time is of the essence, right? So, by the time we get it to the full board and then take a vote on it, it's going to be right at our doorstep on needing to do something.
Then I will lead on you guys for motions.
So, and I think the, recommendation that we follow suit with what the city has done so far and use that $200,000 per year for the next 2 years, and then maybe have HR Finance be able to come up with the funding source for that. That would be my recommendation.
So we have that as a motion. Do I have a second on that motion? Supervisor Conway. All right, with that, we'll open up to any more discussion before we vote. Does anyone else want to discuss the motion? All right, with that, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks a lot for your time, you guys, and thank you, Chief Barnes. All right, with that, we'll move on to 7, educational presentations and committee discussion, BOH 2025 Life Survey slides.
So I think that's me. I'm Laura Scuderi. I'm the Marathon County Health Officer. And I did provide some slides for you. This was actually supposed to go to the Board of Health this morning, but there were technological difficulties, so we weren't able to go over it. But I wanted to introduce you all today to the upcoming new and improved 2025 Life Survey that will be open for any and all Marathon County residents to complete. My slides should be in your packet. It looks like they're being pulled up right now. State statute DHS 140.03 calls for the health department staff to lead the collection of data to guide public health planning and decision making at the local level in alignment with the most recent state public health agenda, Also, the same statute explicitly states that we need to conduct a community health assessment resulting in a community health improvement plan at least every 5 years. The Life Survey is that assessment. We use this to determine the collective health priorities of our community, but also to satisfy this mandatory requirement. We're not the only ones required to do a community health assessment in Marathon County. Hospital systems and federally qualified health centers such as Aspirus, Marshfield, and Bridge Clinic all have to conduct an assessment. In the hospital world, these assessments are called community health needs assessments, and hospitals are required to actively solicit feedback from a broad range of community members, including those representing diverse populations, to ensure their needs are considered when identifying and prioritizing health concerns. This assessment is also used by nonprofits and school systems to determine the resource allocation towards health priorities. It's also used to share resources and direct collective effort. The health department works with key stakeholders like United Way and our health systems to gather data and use that data in developing a community-based plan to address the key health issues in our community. So, you're on the exact slide I was going to ask to go into. The Marathon County Local Indicators for Excellence report, or we call it the LIFE report, is a data-driven depiction of the quality of life in Marathon County that is produced every 3 years. The LIFE report, released in June 2023, marked the 13th edition of the report, which dates back to the mid-1990s. It's powered by Marathon County Pulse, which is the data reporting platform that we have available to everyone online. And the LIFE report exists exclusively on Marathon County Pulse online. It's broken down into 7 sections that encompass nearly every aspect of life in Marathon County. The purpose of the LIFE report is to acknowledge community successes and progress, to identify community calls to action, and to serve as a catalyst for change by advancing community conversations and partnerships. Today, we're excited to share that in 2025, the LIFE survey will shift to a new community engagement survey in which any Marathon County resident is encouraged to participate, and survey results will be used to shape the 2026 LIFE report, but I'll go into that in a little bit. So we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. The LIFE report is a community effort involving over 50 local community partners to review community data, develop narrative, identify successes and progress, and prioritize community calls to action. Okay, we could go to the next slide. The LIFE Executive Committee provides the overall project oversight, planning, and coordination of LIFE report subcommittees. The LIFE report continues to be led through a strong partnership between Aspirus, the Health Department, and United Way of Marathon County. We could go to the next slide, please. The steering committee is comprised of members of the executive committee, chairs and co-chairs from each of the 7 subcommittees. The steering committee guides the work of the 7 subcommittees and prioritizes the final calls, actions, and successes and progress for the LIFE report. LIFE subcommittees are comprised of community partners and local experts for their respective areas of focus. LIFE subcommittee chairs will assemble their subcommittees, reaching out to local experts to serve on that committee. We go to the next slide, please. So at the Health Department, this is the team that works on it. Right now, Aaron normally would be providing this this update to you, but he is at another meeting currently. But Aaron's the go-to person, and the other staff, there's Hannah, Sarah and Hannah both support the LIFE survey team. So we'll go to the next slide, please. These are some of the community partners that assist with the LIFE survey development, distribution, and community engagement. Okay, next slide, please. In 2025, the LIFE survey shifts to a new and improved community engagement and perception survey to allow for increased participation from Marathon County residents. This is an opportunity for more residents to offer their perspective on what issues are important for each of the 7 sections of the LIFE report, and what they tell us can be used to help develop the calls to action for each section. Not only will the 2026 LIFE report feature all of the local data indicators and community narrative, for the first time ever, it will include resident voice and participation on what issues are most important to our community. So you can go into the next section. This is a little preview of the survey itself. Also, for the first time ever, the LIFE survey will be online and available in multiple languages. Paper copies will also be made available upon request, but we're strongly encouraging people to participate online. We are following other Wisconsin counties that have adopted a more comprehensive community engagement model and online survey. And when they did so, it resulted in a significant number of responses. For instance, Wood County received 3,500 responses in their 2023 survey. We'd like to beat them because we're very competitive. We want to hear from as many Marathon County residents as possible. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have created a robust communication and outreach plan and toolkit that includes everything and anything the community partners might need to promote the Life Survey. We're happy to share it with anybody who wants it. So if board members would like this survey in order to get more information from constituents, we can send that out so that they can direct individuals to where they would go to the survey. You can see there's a QR code. There's also a link. We can get you all that information. We also have it looks like Instagram and Facebook pieces that we can send out to. Next slide, please. So there's two big takeaways today. Number one, we'd like everybody to take this survey and give their input into the life report. And then a second takeaway is that we really like everybody to have a chance to share their thoughts. So encourage you to spread the word about the 2025 Life Survey with friends, family, community networks, anybody that lives within Marathon County. This is a little bit about our timeline. So you're getting a sneak preview. We wanted to give it early. So that you had the chance to ask for materials if you'd like to promote the survey. The week of the 17th, we're going to be sent, so it's coming, but we'll send you the Life's campaign toolkit at any point if you're asking for it. And then on March 1st, the survey link will go live, and we'll be collecting that data until May 31st. So that is that. I do have a little video from Jeff Sargent, who couldn't be here today, to speak to the survey as well. So can we play that video?
Hi, I'm Jeff Sargent. I'm the Executive Director of United Way of Marathon County. We're a proud partner of the 2025 Life Survey, and we want to hear from you. How's life in Marathon County? The survey is for everyone who lives here and takes just 5 to 10 minutes to complete. It's your chance to share your opinions on what's important to improve the quality of life in our community. The survey is open from March 1st to May 31st and is anonymous. Don't miss your chance to make a difference. Together, we can build a stronger, more connected Marathon County. Take the 2025 Life Survey and share the link today.
So that video will also be available to share once we roll it all out. But thank you for your time today, and I hope everybody has as much excitement for this survey as we do here at the Health Department. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Any questions, comments for Laura? Go ahead, Supervisor Conway.
Just a very large thank you for putting it online. I look at this all the time in the last number of years, and every time I see the number one problem that people think is texting and driving, very happy to have maybe a slightly younger demographic taking the Life Report today.
Go ahead.
Yes, we're going to have it online, and it's also going to be in multiple languages. For those who are not comfortable with doing the survey online, we can get them paper surveys. So that is also an option as well.
Is the commercial that Jeff Sargent just was in, is that going to be something that's presented on our TVs?
We didn't buy any commercial time. This would just be something that would be shared over our social media potentially.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, thanks again, Laura.
Thank you.
7B, introduction of Aaron Galindo, Interim Veteran Service Officer, and review of 2024 benefit data.
All right, well, I'll start. I have the great privilege today to introduce Aaron. He is our Interim Veteran Service Officer, so if you didn't know, Jill Jeffroy retired at the end of January 10th, early January. And little history on Aaron. He comes to us. He's been with us for since about the middle of last year in veterans, but he transferred from the sheriff's office. He's been with us for a little over 5 years. We're very fortunate to have him. Great asset to the team. I've already received, I didn't tell Aaron this, but I already got a call from a veterans group who had nothing but great things to say about him. Great to have, very level head. It's always good when you have the law enforcement background. It helps you in a lot of tense conversations. So it's been a pleasure to work with Aaron thus far. And we did put in your packet some data relative to the 2024 kind of annual report from the Veterans Office. I asked Jill to start doing this a couple of years ago, and they've done very well in keeping a couple of key metrics, and we look to expand some of those. But Aaron can talk through and answer any questions. As the administrator, I look oftentimes to the bottom line, dollars up front. It is always eye-opening when you think about the work that the Veterans Office does to bring in monetary awards. Again, they're assisting veterans access benefits that they are lawfully entitled to. And sometimes that means spending a lot of time with a veteran, walking them through that application. But you can just see 2024 was a big year in terms of helping veterans submit those new applications. We have over $3.5 million of new money coming into the county. That a lot of that, I would probably estimate the vast majority gets spent in the county. So a lot of that is sales tax revenue that the board I know greatly appreciates, but it also stimulates the local economy and most importantly helps those veterans procure the services they need. Again, based on their service to the country and benefits that they're lawfully entitled. But with that long introduction, I turn it over to Aaron. And Aaron, anything you want to offer on the data or a little bit about yourself is always good as well.
Yes, thank you. As Administrator Leonard said, my name is Aaron. I came from the Sheriff's Office. I started there in 2019 with Sheriff Parks, who graciously hired me, and then I immediately left for a deployment to the Middle East. So that was my initiation to the county here. I worked there for the last 4 years, transitioned here in June, like the administrator said. It's exciting transitioning into this position because, as I was telling some other members here earlier, I get to do the best part of law enforcement, but that's my main focus now is the community outreach, working with a specific group of people, getting them the assistance they need, whether that's VA healthcare benefits, pension benefits for veterans who are war era veteran who maybe are low income or under the poverty level that are eligible for some of these additional benefits through the VA to help get them and assist them through day-to-day tasks. So those are some of the really big things that we do. We have a lot that our office does: pensions, burial benefits, survivor benefits. There's all sorts of things. As you can see, the numbers kind of speak for themselves. We had some increases to a lot of things. Like you had mentioned, this year or this past year, we had a huge increase for our monetary awards. The large reason for this was due to some issues in the VA system that were corrected and veterans receiving compensation due to errors in appointments with doctors that had occurred all the way back to 2002. So a lot of that was a benefit to that. The other metric, some of the things that we're going to try to expand on, I'm trying to get, so the monetary award, when you look at that amount of money is strictly back pay that the veterans receive as a result of their claim. So when we put a claim in for a veteran, we file what's called an intent to file form. That form secures their date of claim to, let's say we do it on February 1st, and we get the claim submitted, let's say March 1st. The VA process takes a lot of time for them to go through, get their examinations completed, everything to get adjudicated through the VA for them to be granted their service connection. So that amount of money is strictly from the date that we submit that intent to file to when the VA grants them that money. That is back pay that they receive for those months. So that's not the continuation or the constant money that they receive thereafter getting their award. So that's a metric I'm going to try to get worked on. I'm going to work with Michael in the administration office to work through some of that because the VA offers some of those stats or rough stats on how much money continually each month is brought in or that the veterans receive in the county. So we're trying to work through that, but it's broken down from 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% because each percentage receives a different amount of compensation. And on top of that, there's other benefits for veterans who are 100% service-connected disabled. They receive property tax exemption in Wisconsin. So that's an additional thing that comes into the county where it's a loss, a net loss, I guess, for the municipality that they live in. But again, it's being usually spent back in the county. You'll see we do have some decreases. There's 2 on there. Burial benefits are down. I would consider that a positive. We had less veterans pass away. The big problem we're running into, well, not a problem, but the large thing we're going through right now is Vietnam era veterans. We're getting to that age where that group of individuals are starting to pass. Gwen does a great job in our office working through that with the veteran surviving spouses. So she works through all that, and then on the back end of that, depending on the veteran status, we can help the surviving spouse apply for pension for survivors, which if they're receiving VA disability, this allows them to receive a small portion of what their spouse was receiving to help them continue to get along until they no longer need it. The other thing that is decreased is our claim date or day average. I believe it was the day average, not the number of claims that we've done. So last year for Jill essentially doing claims on her own for a couple months before I started and during the transition and stuff. And then when I came on, there's 704 claims. That's 704 veterans that potentially received, whether that's health benefits or things like that. So those are really some of the big things. Our service commission, we're working through some more of that stuff. As mentioned here with unhoused and homelessness and other concerns we have in the county. Prior to my starting, that was one thing that was discussed. Our Veteran Service Commission used to only allow a maximum of assistance of $700. With rent and things like that and the cost of everything going up, that was changed to $1,000 to try to help assist in some of those situations where we have veterans who are truly in need of assistance that meet those requirements. But rent being so high, there's only so much that we can do. On the topic of homelessness, I've been working with, I'm sure the task force is aware, the HUD-VASH program, VORP, VHRP, and then like the WIA over in Chippewa Falls. So Marathon County's veteran population is roughly 8,000 veterans. We had a Marathon County Coalition resource meeting last week, and in that meeting, we talk about homelessness and go over some of those things. I believe talking with, let me grab her name. Excuse me. I believe her name was Crystal. She helps with the point in time count. And when they were going through some of that, they identified a relatively small amount of unhoused veterans. We attribute a lot of that to the assistance we get from HUD-VASH, VORP, along with CVI, the Center for Veterans Issues. Those organizations, I'm waiting to get an official number from the HUD-VASH program, but I believe earlier today when I was in a meeting with them, they had said something. They currently have like 34 housing vouchers out to veterans in the county, assisting them with paying for their monthly rent, helping prevent them from becoming unhoused. The CVI program as well assists with a lot of that. They work with HUD-VASH hand in hand in assisting in preventing unhoused and homelessness. CVI is more of it depends on this current situation and the current status of unhoused and the population that they have. But right now they're in the ebb and flow of veterans who are immediately or imminently going to lose housing and receive that court-ordered 5-day notice, or are currently unhoused, are their focus right now due to the weather and things like that. So we refer a lot of our local veterans to organizations like that as well, in hopes to try to mitigate some of the strain on local resources that maybe can be used in other locations if we have the assistance that we can do. Other than that, there's just some key summary things that were included in your packet for that. Nothing extraordinary or spectacular, just some basic points for the year. If you guys have any questions, I'm more than willing to do my best to answer them.
Questions for Aaron? Go ahead. Supervisor Cavelli.
Thank you, Aaron. Being a veteran myself, and I know there's another veteran in the room here as well, as far as the veterans that they came across that the count that were unhoused, what is their guidance, or do they guide them into your services, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the really cool thing about the Veteran Resource Coalition meetings that we have is we get together anybody locally who has any say in anything or has any benefits that they can provide to local veterans. We had Quinton, who is part of Wisconsin, or the WisVet network out of Milwaukee. I think he had said that last year they had provided over $300,000 throughout the state to veterans in need for housing programs like this. So in those situations, and I know prior to me, Jill worked with Tracy Rieger, now Durante, and going through and working with some of these other local individuals, we're trying to build these really good relationships where we can advise them what we can do to assist, and if we can't assist, where we can point the veterans to get that assistance. So most cases, what we're seeing is that when individuals who may be out doing the point in time count or whatever it may be, if they come across that and a person does identify as veteran, then they refer them to us, because a lot of the problems, I shouldn't say a lot of the problems, the concerns that come up are them not being able to provide verification of their service. So that's one of the things when we have veterans who are unhoused that don't have access to a computer, a phone, or whatever, when they come in, we can help them go through the process of submitting a request for their military records. In order to do that, we can either provide them a piece of paper that they can mail out that we can mail for them, or generally what I've been doing, because I can do the request in like 3 minutes, is I just have them sit next to me on the computer. We type up the request, we send it to them. They have to have an email for that request. So if they don't have access to a computer or phone, we just recommend that if they have an email, they can go to the library. They can get those documents sent to them directly through a secure email from the National Personnel Resource Center or from the National Archives. And then they get that and they can provide that to whatever organization it may be, VHRP, VORP, HUD-VASH, or any local organization. But generally speaking, those are the processes that we try to go through. If there's recommendations or things that you think that we can do to assist in that, that's what we're here for. Veteran benefits, community outreach, whatever we can do. So, and once I get some more of these numbers, I can try to forward them on from the HUD-VASH program and that team as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your service. Appreciate it. One thing I wished I would have been able to do was go through the outpatient clinic, the new one. Is there any way that we can, as a Health and Human Services, get some type of tour? You know, I know that there's HIPAA regulations and things like that, but it would be really nice to see that facility. So since we took it on, what was it, 2 years ago? Yeah, it would be really nice to see that.
Yeah, I will. So it's funny you mentioned that. Tomorrow we have the Wausau CBOC coming to River Drive. They're utilizing Room 5 to train a bunch of their employees on PACT Act stuff to get up to date on things. So Chris, I spoke with somebody today. One of the supervisors down there, they're going to be coming up tomorrow, and I have to help them set up the room. I can get a request in. My short answer is, again, with HIPAA, I'm not sure what they'll allow us to do. I think it may be we can go there. They can maybe give us a small presentation, see some of the non-restricted HIPAA areas. But I'll get a request in. I can forward what the response would be to Lance to have them sent out to the supervisors. It would be a really good opportunity because going from the small dentist office we used to go in for treatment to this large facility it's a spectacular change. And we're seeing more veterans wanting to go in to get assistance through the VA because they have more opportunities, whether that's dental, vision, all sorts of things.
The location is perfect. You know, it's central Wisconsin. It's right here. I know from working at the Eye Clinic of Wisconsin before I retired, a lot of our veterans ended up having to go to Toma for, I believe it was the eye care down there, but just to have something like that for our veterans here in central Wisconsin. And I'm sure it's utilized from communities outside of Marathon County. I really would like to get in there and see it. And I think they did have a tour before they opened. I missed it. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Of course. Like I said, I'll see and I'll prompt it to them as the Health and Human Services Committee for Marathon County would like some kind of a tour, and we will use some verbal judo in order to navigate the process and see what we can do.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Aaron?
Offer something?
No, Lance, sorry. you
No,
cannot.
I can't say anything. So Aaron did a really good job of telling you, like a big part of what the VSO office does is that interfacing with other organizations. I think that's been an area where we excel. Because again, there's not enough resources, but there's a lot of hands willing to help. So I want to give you a couple of highlights. He gave you the 2024 summary. This is what I foresee Aaron focusing on in 2025, and we'll have to talk through kind of an individual work plan. But one of the big things is they're moving. Aaron referenced River Drive. They're moving to our Lakeview campus, one of the many departments, part of our facility consolidation plan. So that's going to be happening in the very near future. So we want to make sure, and Aaron is going to be focusing on how do we make sure the veterans know we're moving, and they've already started a lot of that work. But then also doing an effective move, which again, I think will serve our veterans better, a better location aligned with other services. So that's one big piece. Another piece that I want to focus on, and it's really going to be working through this committee. I think Aaron did a nice job with the data and talking about some of our data work moving forward in 25. There is a lot of benefit that's conferred upon our community when we're able to serve our veterans more effectively and getting them the resources they need. Right now, that's a very small but mighty department of 2.75 people. Aaron and I have already talked about how do we bring on the new staff, because right now they're very small and mighty. They are a 1.75 allocated department. I want to work to get the 0.75 position. I want to work with Aaron to bring you a proposal to make that a full-time person. 3 is still, it's a heavy ask. If we can get to 3, and I know the county board has the last couple of years given budget directive to no new levy supported positions, and this would be in many respects, some levy would go in there. They get the Veterans Office gets some grant support as well, but it's a levy funded position. But I think the data starts to speak for itself for why it's a very, very strong investment. Not only it's the right thing to do to serve veterans, but if you do look for that financial ROI, it's certainly there. So those are just a couple of the things we're going to work on in 25, apart from, like Aaron said, linking veterans with, if it is homeless veterans or any veteran going through a challenge, linking them with the resources they need, that Veterans Service Commission. Aaron and the people you have serving on that commission do a very good job of spending the county levy money last. It's link people with existing resources in the community through nonprofits and other service organizations. And when that doesn't work, like Aaron said, the last pot of money they dip into is the levy. So that's kind of what I see in 2025. I don't know if you have any other priorities, Aaron, you're looking for?
No, those are really it. You kind of hit the nail on the head. I know when I spoke with another member here today, some concerns as well, or not concerns, some requests that maybe have come out too is what can we do and how can we reach out to more veterans in fashions that are living in the county? What can we do to get in contact with them? I was talking with Sarah about the move, and I was informed that through some of the programs that she has, so we have a email roster right now or an email list of about 750 veterans in the county. That list, she can blast out any updates. So when we had the Veterans Days event, she was able to send that PDF poster through email to anybody that was on that roster. So something in the future, another thing that we may look into is when there's large changes in legislature towards benefits or for veterans, if that email roster would also be something where we can provide updates to the veterans. So that way, hey, this is what's going on, this is what we can do. Or even just if it's allowed, depending on messages allowed for the year or texts allowed, Happy Veterans Day, or sending out a notification to recognize the veterans in the county. Those are some other small projects and things that we're going to look into for additional outreach, just to help veterans be identified and recognized, because a lot of that goes a long ways for especially some of the older veterans who we're still trying to get encouraged to go on honor flights and things like that to help them through stuff. So those are really it. Thank you for your time. If there's any other questions, I'll try to answer.
Anything further? All right, thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to 8, next meeting date and time, announcement, and future agenda items. Committee members are asked to bring future ideas for discussion. 8B, next meeting Wednesday, March 5th, 2025 at 3 p.m. And I will take number 9. Motion made, motion second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.